Hey there and welcome. It is good to have you with me tonight. We've had a little bit of a technical glitch with the emails and the links going out, so I'm really grateful for those of you who have made it to be with me tonight, and everybody else will, of course, get their replay link. And again, I apologize. We've started using a new app, and apparently I still have a few things to learn. Tonight, we're talking about the history of iridology and myths and truths. And so we are just going to dive right in and start talking about that. Yeah, just before we do that, a little bit of an introduction. I am Judith Cobb. I am a level 3 certified iridology instructor through the IPA organization. And they have been giving out badges for just a few years. So here's my most recent badges. I've been in the holistic health world since 1980 and have been studying and learning and coaching and working with individuals and teaching classes pretty much almost since the beginning. I am also a professional member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners, and a professional member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. IPA has given me some significant honors in the last few years. In 1920 or 2022, not 1922, I am not that old, I assure you. In 2022, I was awarded Instructor of the Year. And in 2024, I was awarded Iridologist of the Year. So really grateful to have been acknowledged in that way. Just doing what I love. Little heads up that our next iridology course is starting on May 15th, 2025. You can find more information at the URL you see on your screen. And for those of you who are with me live, I am going to pop into the chat box and post that in the chat box. There we go. So that will allow you to speak with me personally about the course and to make sure it's the right fit for you. For those of you who are watching this on the replay, you're watching it maybe on YouTube, take a moment, like the video, share the video, drop a comment, and subscribe to my channel. That's the fourth one. It just helps to make the videos more visible to more people, and that's always a good thing. So when we look at the history, we know that iridology has evolved, and because it's been evolving, as science evolves, as science asks questions, new theories are put out, and sometimes those theories get glommed onto before they should, and they haven't been totally proven yet. So we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. We know that iridology existed in Egypt, India, China, and Greece. There's lots of evidence of that. And again, we know that it is a science of asking questions and of moving us forward with the information we have. Many of us have heard the story of Ignaz von Petschle, who became a medical doctor in Budapest, Hungary. This is a story that has never been replicated anywhere. It says that he caught an owl when he was a young boy. The owl had a broken wing or a broken leg. And Ignaz supposedly saw a black line in the owl's eye. And as he nursed this bird back to health, the line disappeared. One would think that with all of the animal sanctuaries and bird rehabilitation sanctuaries that are available now, that a technician somewhere there would have noticed something like this as well. But it's never been replicated. And so what we need to look to Ignaz for is that it triggered his interest. Whatever he saw, whatever he thought he saw, we don't know, but it triggered his interest in iridology. He became a medical doctor, and he started doing little hand drawings of his patients' eyes and writing out their stories, and began to correlate, well, when people have this problem, they often have something different in this part of their eye. And so we're grateful that he took the time to do that, because he started with creating one of the very first iridology maps that we have. His uncle, August von Petschle, recognized years later that Ignaz was looking at an owl's eyes and not that of a human, and that he did not have the proper equipment to prove what had been recorded in the stories. It is time for iridology to move forward based on sound research rather than hearsay. This, according to Ellen Jensen. And I agree. I mean, he was using a 2-power magnifying glass, which is pretty amazing if you can, do what he did with that. But he also couldn't understand why some people had a particular marking and symptoms, and other people had the same marking but didn't have symptoms, or they had symptoms but they didn't have the same marking. So there were some variables in there that he couldn't understand, that were questions in his mind that he needed answers to. So now we understand that most of what we see in the iris is genetic potential. It's not necessarily diagnostic of what's happening right now. We use the sclera for that. Pastor Neil Lilliquist also was doing research in the central part of Europe way back in the late 1800s. He assessed that when we have an iris that has many tightly packed fibers like this does, that person had stronger resilience. They could throw off disease, they could resist disease and break down better. Someone who had a looser appearance, more openings in the fiber structure, would not have quite that same amount of resilience. Pastor Lilliquist also felt that eyes changed due to toxic exposure. So medications back then were very different. I've just been reading a book about how there was a lot of metals used, mercury especially, in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, a lot of sulfur, things like that. But we now know that the pigments we see in the eye, so any extra patches of color we see in the eye, are not the result of toxic exposure at all. They are also, these are genetically set. They're genetically determined, and they do give us information, and they may not be present at birth. They may become visible later in life. That does not mean toxic exposure. It means something has been activated. Pastor Emmanuel Falca started an iris map as well. All of these gentlemen started creating iris maps, and it's interesting that when they all, as we've gathered them all over time, they're all very, very similar. He started laying the foundation for others to build on by defining what we call the constitutions. He also taught iridology, and in Germany there is a school called the Falca Institute where iridology is taught. In Germany, it is only legal for naturopaths to study and practice iridology. Rudolf Schnabel researched pigment and pupil tonus. He is one of the first to use a microscope to examine the iris. Rudolf Schnabel said that it was no easy task, and those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy can be learned within a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. I strongly believe that. I don't think a weekend workshop is nearly enough training to do iridology well. Joseph Unger in Passau, Germany, through the 1900s. He was a student of Schnabel's rather. He became a naturopath, and he was concerned about the different languages used by iridologists. He wanted to unify the language. And he also knew that students were reading books and accepting the printed word about iridology before adequate research was completed. Exactly what I said earlier, that theories were put forth and people started hanging on to those as if they were absolutely correct, and they had not yet been proved. They were simply theories. Joseph Unger refused to publish his work until it had been analyzed and reviewed by his peers. Joseph Deck was a dedicated iridology researcher. He pioneered iridology photography, and he was also an instructor. He's going to be important to us in just a few moments. Theodor Kriege was a student of Unger, Deck, and Schnabel, and he felt that iridology was the #1 assessment tool, and it was best used with other assessment tools, that it would help to confirm what had been understood through urinalysis, hands, fingernails, tongue, feces analysis. He also said, I hope that a later generation will succeed in establishing a single uniform system. In spite of zealous efforts, these have so far not succeeded, and we are still struggling with that to this day. We have Dr. Bernard Jensen in California, who kept iridology alive. He was working with a lot of the research of some of the older researchers and some of the things that hadn't quite been proven out all the way. But we love Bernard Jensen because he kept iridology alive in North America when information was not forthcoming from behind the Iron Curtain anymore during the Cold War. Then in the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, Harry Wolff and Bill Cardona teamed up, and Harry Wolff was an American-born German. He could read and speak German fluently. He is still alive. I've been in touch with him. And he started teaching what he was learning from reading Joseph Deck's books. He then connected with Bill Cardona, and they started teaching, and Bill Cardona was my constitutional instructor. So I started out as a Jensenian. My first teacher had studied with Bernard Jensen a couple of times. And so for about the first 10, 12 years, I was a Jensenian iridologist. And as I began to be very disillusioned with it, I was blessed to find constitutional and Bill Cardona. So we're going to look quickly at the three different constitutional, or the three different iridology types that are mostly practiced in North America. Jensenian was originally taught by Bernard Jensen. He taught that the iris changes when the body changes, and healing lines will happen, and that healing lines will appear in the eyes, that lacunae, or what Jensen called lesion shape and size, would change. Remember when we looked at that eye that had the very loose fiber structure? He felt that those openings could get filled in with extra fiber. And those would be called healing lines. He also taught that you could do an iris reading cold with no background information, that you could just look at the person's face and not talk to them, or look at a photo and just do an iris analysis from that. Ellen Tart Jensen, with Dr. Bernard Jensen's blessing, has updated Bernard's work and has made it more in harmony with constitutional iridology. Still not quite 100%, but almost. Then we have Rayid, which there's a lot of different names for Rayid depending on who the author was. Rayid is Denny Johnson's work. There's behavioral iridology, there's emotional iridology. Each of those has a different author. And this teaches that emotional traits are genetic and are revealed by markings in the irides. Readings may be done cold. Information gathered from the irides may be combined with personal and family history information for interpretation. Originally founded by Denny Johnson, but continued by Jim Burgess and by Andrew Mason, I believe is the name of the fellow in England who is working with it. I think it's Andrew Mason, but I could be wrong. It might be John Andrews. Constitutional iridology is originated with Joseph Deck and others, used by medical doctors in Italy, Germany, and Russia. I had a new client come to me a few months ago who was a doctor in a small country just outside of Russia. And she came in specifically because she wanted to have iridology done. She said, when you go to the doctor in Russia or in her home country, the first thing they do is they look at your irides. And they use that to help understand what your symptoms are telling them and to guide the testing process, which is exactly how we like to use it. There are correlative medical studies being done. Constitutional teaches us that the eyes are a reflection of genetic structure of the body. And constitutional is the foundation of the course that I have developed called Dynamic Iridology. With constitutional iridology, it does not give us answers. It tells us what questions to ask. Other iris and sclera changes may continue to become visible with time, revealing areas that may need support. And background information is important. We don't do readings cold. We take a very holistic approach. So I started learning iridology in 1979, as I mentioned earlier. I've been using iridology professionally since 1980. And the only thing that was available here where I live at that point in time was Bernard Jensen's work. As I started practicing it, and had practiced it for several years, had purchased a professional camera, I was getting really frustrated. I would see eyes like the ones you see on your screen now. And I'd been taught that every one of these, what they called lesions, was a pathological problem that was happening right now. And that it needed to be addressed, that as we worked with this person, we would be able to fill this in with more lines, with more fiber structure. And that would mean we were making progress. And the problem I had was in that first many years of practicing whenever I would have an eye like this. And I started saying, well, your eyes say you've got a problem here and here and here. And we've got the map that tells us what body part these would correlate to. Most of the time my clients would go, no, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't. And so it was really frustrating and very disheartening. Now, the interesting thing is I was still creating herbal programs and nutrition programs for them based on what I saw in the eyes and based on what their symptoms were and based on what their diet and lifestyle were already like. And they were getting better. So that was good. They were getting results, but the eyes were not changing. So not only did each of these not mean there was a pathological problem happening right now, but the eyes didn't change the way I'd been promised they would. What we know in constitutional iridology is each of these lacunae, we call them lacunae, which just means unfilled area or open area. These are inherited. These tell us where some genetic potentials have been inherited from the past 3 or 4 generations. And so when we see these, we want to ask about personal and family history rather than proclaiming something. I also don't actually ask all those questions on a first appointment. My first question is always, what would you like my help with? And as I'm looking at their eyes and their diet and their lifestyle in the context of what they would like help with, I'm able then to pick and choose the markings that give me information about what the client is most concerned about right now. That helps me now to create even more succinct and targeted programs to get my clients' results faster. And that's exactly how I teach my students. So this particular type of eye suggests that they may need some support with balancing blood sugar. I'm going to ask them blood sugar questions and family history about blood sugar. We also might see a need for some hormonal work. And because this is their genetic potential, that hormonal work is going to be lifelong. It's going to mean that we are going to have to teach nutrition that will support the endocrine system for the rest of their life. And as they get older and things shift, it's going to need to be adjusted to stay in pace with what their body balance is doing. I was taught as a Jensenian that uneven pigment, like what we see in this eye, just meant this person was incredibly toxic. And that if we would just cleanse this person, and if this person would do the right things with their diet and their lifestyle and their foods and their supplements and go on a high-powered cleanse, that we could turn these eyes blue. So I put people with eyes like this through all kinds of heavy-duty cleansing protocols, and their eyes did not change one little bit. I had teachers who had before and after pictures in their books and in their materials, and it looked like they were convincing. It looked like the eyes were bluer, but I didn't know anything back then about photographic technology. And so I didn't understand how the source of light, the intensity of the light, the brand of the camera, the brand of the film, back then we were shooting film, the brand of the paper that was being used, the settings on the developer would all change the output. Even with digital, a camera, the image on the LED screen on my camera looks very different from what it looks on my computer. I've got 2 computer monitors attached to my computer, and they both display color differently. And if I print up an iris photo, it looks different as well. So I can have a minimum of 4 or 5 different renditions of the colors, which means that we cannot use photography necessarily for before and after unless we've controlled all of the parameters of that. So as I was getting really frustrated with the Jensenian style because the eyes weren't changing the way I'd been told they were, that's exactly when, they say the student is ready, the teacher appears. That's when I was able to connect with constitutional iridology, something I'd never heard of before. In constitutional iridology, what we see here is this is telling us in this particular eye that the liver and the kidneys are dominating how the sympathetic nervous system works and how the digestion is working. And so we want to ask about symptoms. We've got to connect that to symptoms. Are there liver symptoms? And this is why we need to know anatomy and physiology, right? Because the client is going to give us their shopping list of things they need help with. And we need to be able to categorize that into possible symptoms. So does this client have symptoms that fit into liver or kidneys or digestion? Is this person prone to holding on to stress? Because stress affects digestion, right? We also want to know what this client's diet and lifestyle are like, and what is this client doing for health? And so we use the eyes to guide the questions we want to ask. We've got the symptoms and we've got the eyes. All of that is going to inform the questions we're going to ask. Right? It's not me sitting down with the eyes and saying, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, or you do this, you do that, your body is doing this. We're always asking, always asking. Again, in the old Jensenian iridology, every one of these gappy areas, whether it's got a border all the way around it or not, would be a pathological problem happening right now. And so when I learned constitutional, it was just mind blown, so mind opening. The old iridology said, again, we need to cleanse this person to get rid of this pigment. We would need to cleanse them to get rid of these open areas and fill these in with fibers. We'd need to do so much building, and we could just fill this all in and give this person a really even textured eye. But that's not how it works, because everything you see in the iris, with the exception of one type of marking, is based in the genetics of the person. So what I learned as I studied constitutional iridology with Harry Wolff and Bill Cardona was that the eyes show us inherent predispositions. They show us where there are weak links that have been passed down for 3 to 4 generations. Again, pigments in the eye show us not that there's an accumulation of toxin there, regardless of what kind of pigment we're looking at, but it does tell us which organs want to be out of balance and how they want to have an impact on other organs. And then we know where we need to be supporting and building. We will never erase these pigments, but we can certainly help the body to function better than it is at the moment, likely. I mean, maybe you're working with a client who's really done all the right things. They've really done a great job of getting their diet organized, getting their stress under control, taking care of and paying attention to where their weak links are. That's the rare client. But if they've done that, the eyes are still going to be the same, but they're going to feel better for it. So this person in particular may have issues with connective tissues. Kidneys maybe don't want to keep up with their work. The liver wants to be a little bit out of balance. The lymphatic system and the immune system here want to make life a little bit difficult. So we want to ask questions about those, right, to see if they're happening now. And if there's a family history of them, what is the diet? What is the lifestyle? Again, our goal here is not to change the eye color. Our goal is very specifically to improve the person's health, to use the eyes and the symptoms to understand what's going on, what is possible, what is capable of happening there, so that we can make the right kinds of suggestions. Old iridology would say this person is very stressed and is headed for a nervous breakdown, that this person needs to do a parasite cleanse. And because this is a darker brown eye, that's mostly where Jensenian iridology would have stopped. Instead, we're going to look at this eye in the context of the owner. This is a woman who is Asian. She's in her mid-30s, and she and her husband came in together. Her concern was that they'd been trying for 3 years to have a baby. They'd already been to the fertility clinic, and there'd been no luck whatsoever. So, I note that she has these rings coming around her eyes that do say she internalizes her stress. That also suggests, if you internalize stress, that you're burning through your stress nutrients, your nerve nutrients, probably pretty quickly. So I asked her about her stress level. It's pretty high. She's an accountant. And her husband echoed that it was pretty high. And when we looked at her diet, it was pretty awful. So we knew that she probably wasn't getting the B vitamins, let alone the B vitamins in the right form, for her to start balancing out her nervous system. She's got a little bit of a haze here, which says that she probably has not been managing her carbs well. And that, of course, when we're looking at fertility, That could be a little bit of a suggestion that this client might have something like polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, I don't get to diagnose that, but if she's not metabolizing her carbs properly, maybe it is PCOS. So as I looked at her eyes, I asked her, has anyone ever used the term insulin resistant when they were speaking with you? They'd been to the fertility clinic, for Pete's sake. I just wondered. She said, yeah, oh yeah, I'm type 2 diabetic now. They've called me type 2 diabetic. I'm on metformin. Okay, so have they used the term polycystic ovarian syndrome? Oh yeah, they said that's why I can't get pregnant, and I've done Clomid and metformin and it's not working. Right. So these eyes gave me those clues as to what I needed to be working on. Some of these, on each of her eyes, one of these darker lines reaches right through the ovary area. Does not mean she has parasites, but it means that there may be a challenge with the ovary. So as we approached her whole being with that information, assessed her diet, we were able to do some radical dietary changes. It still took her 18 months to conceive that she now has a beautiful baby boy. And she delivered in 4.5 hours from start to finish. Really kind of wild. So here we have one of those famous myths that's out there. And that is that you can change your eyes based on diet, supplements, and so on. So these are the pictures of one person's eyes. Let's match up some markings exactly where they are so that we know that we are looking at the very same person here. And we've even got this here, right? We've got, this is the exact same person. And we've even got a little bit of a darker space, a gap here, a little bit here, right? We've got the darker gap here. It's all matched up. These are the same person. I'm not pulling a bait and switch here. There are many people who would put this second image up with this first one and say, oh, look at how much brighter that eye is. Look at how much paler the yellows are. This person's done a lot of cleansing. That's amazing. Look at how much straighter the fibers are. The only thing that's changed here, as far as these pictures go, is the camera. This was a print film with an incandescent side flash. This was a digital camera with an LED flash. Different brands of camera, different types of camera. That's going to change the output. And notice here the light is a little bit dimmer, which allows the pupil to be larger. The light here is brighter, which allows the pupil to be smaller. Smaller pupil stretches the iris fibers, makes them go straighter. Larger pupil compresses the iris fibers, which makes them look wavier. Right, so this is important. Now, the other thing is, notice this pigment here going from about 30 minutes upwards towards about the 42-minute mark. At the age of 65, that pigment is obvious, but at the age of 42, it wasn't there. This is pigment that has built over time, and it teaches us that there is an organ that genetically wants to be out of balance. That's the color, teaches us which organ wants to be out of balance. The placement teaches us which organs it is going to have the strongest impact on. Right, so and this fellow has done multiple cleanses. He's got a very clean diet, and yet this pigment has built. Healing lines don't happen. The eyes do not put more healing lines in. These are capillaries that are coated with collagen. So this is actually my eye. In 2017, this was my eye, how my eye looked. I want you to focus right in here. 17th of March, 2019. Note that is, we're just looking at the fibers, the colors again. There's a little variation here. Part of that is because here I was semi-stoned. Seriously, I had broken my wrist in 2 places and had surgery, had a double surgery. I've got 2 steel plates in my wrist now. These pictures were taken just a couple of days after the surgery. So we have nothing different in this area at all. And then just as if breaking my arm once wasn't enough, on Mother's Day in May 2019, I fell down some stairs and broke the olecranon, so the elbow of the same arm. That always requires surgery. Notice that this looks very much the same. There's nothing different. The colors are different because, again, I didn't take time to check my settings and match them up from one picture to the other. So that will account for the color difference. This is that arm area. And as that arm healed, again, I didn't check my camera settings, which accounts for the variations in color, but the fibers look exactly the same as they did before I ever broke my arm. We don't have any extra fibers in there, in spite of the fact that my arm has healed beautifully with about 97% flexibility and mobility, right? So we need to remember that healing lines don't happen. Some people will tell you that pigments need to be cleansed, that you need to, and we've seen these just a few minutes ago, that cleansing will take these pigments out, and that it won't. It absolutely won't. Can we make lacunae disappear with cleansing? Again, so what we're looking at is the tiny little lacunae that are in here versus here. This was the first picture, but notice how small the pupil is. Less light, so different camera. We can see that it's a different camera. We've got a different light on that. So less light means the pupil is larger, which means the fibers get compressed, which if you think of a balloon, a long thin balloon, if you squeeze it from the ends, it's going to get fatter. It's exactly what happens here. We're squeezing these fibers from the ends, these get fatter, which means when the pupil gets smaller, those lacunae are going to stretch out and become thinner, but we're not making them disappear. They're simply looking different because the fibers shifted slightly in there, ever so slightly. So as we look at this, again, the thing we need to remember is we don't make lacunae disappear. We don't bring fiber into the eye. We don't grow new fiber in the eyes, and we don't disappear any of the pigment. Can we see parasites in the eyes? No, we cannot. You will see many people who are using the old Jensenian iridology will talk about these as being parasite lines, that these mean you've got parasites. They do not mean you have parasites. They mean there is a weak link in the body that may hold on to toxins that could host parasites. They also mean there is an interruption in the nerve feed to the organ that is in that area. Again, this is a genetic marking. This has been passed down through the last 3 to 4 generations. And so we are working with this client, of course. This is the client we looked at earlier who was struggling with fertility. We've worked very hard to improve her health overall. And we were working hard on her health for a good 18 months before she conceived, so that she would have a chance of passing on better genetic material. Her husband was totally in on this. When we changed this woman's diet, the husband changed his diet to match. So we know that they then were working on their genetic structure, on their gametes, if you will, to improve what is passed on to the children. So which iridology chart is correct? It's going to depend on what you want to do. You want to choose the chart that matches what you're going to do. Now, this is the iris map that Bill Caradonna created to begin with, and then we had some more research come out, and it needed to be updated. So this is my updated version. I went to Bill and said, would you mind if I used your map as an outline and built on that with the new information? And he was pretty happy to have me do it. I've just posted a link in the chat box to where you should be able to download a copy of this. So it's a matter of, you'll go to this link, you'll enter your information, and then it will send you an email with the link to where you can download. Okay, so you'll notice, if you've been hanging out with iridologists much lately, that we've got areas here that don't have anything in them as far as organ or gland or anything like that. And that's because what would be in here is generally not metabolically important. Like you've got things like the outer ear, the inner ear, you've got the hand and the foot and the knee and in various places on this chart. For most people, the knee does not have a metabolic activity, right? And so with constitutional iridology, we're looking at the constitution. We are looking at how does one organ impact the next? What is the sequence of impact? If we start with this out of balance, what are the other dominoes that are going to fall? And so that's why we focus on this one when we learn the dynamic iridology approach, because we are focusing on constitution, not transient things. We'll hear those transient things, like people will say, I've got arthritis in my knee. I don't need to see a mark in the eye to say, oh, you've got arthritis in your knee. Well, let's just see if your eyes agree with you. I don't need that. I understand the chemistry of arthritis. I understand the emotion of arthritis. And so I'm not looking for the knee when I look in their eyes. I am looking for things like, how do they digest protein? How do their kidneys excrete excess acid? And I'm going to ask the client, have you ever injured your knee? Right? Because that's all going to add up. I'm going to want to know what the diet's like. Right? So I don't need to see a knee area in the eye to know how to work with the symptom of a knee that has arthritis. Does that make sense? Is brown pigment in a blue eye an indication of toxicity? Is yellow pigment an indication of sulfur buildup? No and no. When we see brown pigment in an eye, it teaches us that the liver wants to be out of balance. When we see where that pigment is sitting, it teaches us which organs will suffer more for the liver wanting to be out of balance. When we see yellow in an eye, it has nothing to do with sulfur. It has everything to do with genetically how the kidneys want to behave. And again, do they want to be out of balance? And if they do, what other organs will that imbalance create stress for? Okay. And you'll find that this will give you a lot of information about the connections between one organ and the next, between diet and organs and that sequence of events. Is white in a blue iris an indication of scarring or stagnant lymph? We could also ask well, let's start with this, an indication of scarring or stagnant lymph. It is not an indication of scarring. There are other marks that suggest an increased risk of potential of scarring, but the white is more of a suggestion that this body is prone to wanting to build too much acid in the tissue, right? So we were just talking about arthritis. That is too much acid being deposited in that joint. All right. So when we see the white in the eye, that is a genetic predisposition. It is not something the person has done to themselves. It's not something that you're going to be able to cleanse out of their eyes. It's an indication as to what their chemistry is genetically predisposed to. You'll hear people say that the white is because the person drinks too much milk and it's leading to too much acid. And that's actually not the case. It doesn't happen like that. Milk doesn't cause the white in the eye. But we all know that milk can create elevated acid, aka mucus, and inflammation. So when we see eyes like this, we know that this person, if they're going to be doing dairy, they probably need to do the A2 milk, and they probably are going to need some help digesting it and breaking it down properly. So truly the answer to both questions is going to be no, because the white also does not guarantee stagnant lymph. You will see people practicing iridology who will look at an eye like this and they will say, oh, you've got stagnant lymph. Your lymph system is so congested. You need to cleanse that. They have no problem selling $1,000 herbal program, which is so broad and has so many parts to it that it would help just about everybody, right? It doesn't change the eyes at all, but it sure clears up the symptoms, but it's a shotgun approach. When that could be done with a few dietary changes and a few herbs, we could get rid of those symptoms and we could control those symptoms quite well. You don't need $1,000 worth. Is this making sense to you? Some people will say you can learn everything you need to know about iridology from books and YouTube videos. So if by everything you mean 1 mark equals 1 problem, then yeah, you can probably learn that very shallow party game version of iridology. If, on the other hand, what you want to do is to learn iridology at a professional level, one that teaches you how to think through an assessment, and again, connect the organs, connect the diet, connect the lifestyle, and link it all together in an individualized fashion rather than a cookie cutter approach, then you're not going to be able to learn all that from books and videos. To learn iridology at a deep professional level requires mentoring and feedback, and that's something you're only going to get from a live teacher. So, question, can we diagnose diseases using iridology? I have seen so many people on social media naming diseases from what they see in the eyes. Now, I'm going to tell you that only licensed medical professionals are allowed to diagnose. Even an ND or an MD that are fully and properly licensed will not and should not diagnose from the eyes. In Germany and Russia, they do not use iridology to diagnose. They use it to guide the process. Huge difference. Back when I studied Jensenian iridology, we were diagnosing left, right, and center. You've got this problem. You've got that problem. And I was usually wrong. But learning constitutional and learning how to let the eyes guide the questions, how to let the eyes help me understand what's going on, what the potentials are in this body. Wow. Now I'm right most of the time. It's really pretty magical. Bill Cardona has said this. He said, iridology cannot be used to diagnose. It is a unique assessment tool to gain understanding of the blueprint of the body, including tendencies towards illness patterns or assessment of resiliency or resistance against the negative influences. But diagnosing the presence or status of illness or disease is never appropriate. And so for the last, since the early 1990s, I've been teaching constitutional iridology. So some other questions that you might want to ask, or that you might be asking, are how long does it take to learn iridology? Can I earn a living with iridology? And I found a course that is taught from books and videos. Good enough? Let's shoot through these one at a time. How long does it take to learn iridology? Well, again, if you want more than a weekend course, 1 marking is 1 problem. If you want to learn how the markings play off each other and you have that firm understanding of anatomy and physiology, then it's going to take you several hours. And by several, I mean the course that I have is 45 to 50 hours of live instruction. Right? And I think it's really important that we have live instruction, and I'll build on this in just a moment. Can you earn a living with iridology? Not if that's all you've got. You need a modality to go with this. I always compare this to taking your car into the mechanic. You think this guy is really good. He does all the assessing and all of the diagnostics, and then he gets your car down off the hoist and he says, yep, I know exactly what's wrong. But I only assess, I don't fix. You have to take your car down to Jim down the street. He knows how to fix your car. Would you go to a mechanic like that? Wouldn't you rather have someone who's assessed it, fix it? That's how iridology is. To do iridology well and to earn a living with it, you need the iridology. You need a strong foundation in anatomy and physiology, which is why I only accept students who have a college level course, a minimum of a 60-hour course. So 60 hours would be like probably 6 credit hours maybe in anatomy and physiology, because then we can go deeper and we look at all of that. How is the eye integrated with the body, with the symptoms, with the diet, with the lifestyle? And then you need to have something like nutrition or herbology or aromatherapy, a modality that you can use to make recommendations for what you've discovered as you've assessed this person's eyes. Does that make sense? That you want to have all of that, right? You need the A and P, you need the training, and you need a modality. I found a course that is taught from books and videos good enough. Well, again, if all you want is a one-to-one correlation and you really don't want to understand the nuances and you don't want to understand how one thing leads to another, then yep, Books and videos, good enough. And so with that, you probably want to have more than just books and videos. You probably want to have someone walking you through and teaching you the nuances, the finer details, how to think through, how to ask the right questions to come up with the best answers. So I feel that if you want to use this professionally, live instruction is the very best. If you're not going to use this professionally, if this is just something that you want to do because you're curious about it, then yeah, I've got a course that is just books and videos as well. And you're certainly welcome to enroll with that. It's not going to give you it's the same curriculum, but it's not going to give you the mentoring that will give you the depth of understanding to use this professionally. So the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to stream their clinical work without sacrificing client care. I found that many holistic practitioners, whether they're nutritionists or herbalists, spend their time in a client session gathering information, and then the practitioner goes off and spends 2 or 3 or 4 hours or more creating a plan that gets delivered to the client either in another appointment or by email. That's even worse. And what happens is that the practitioner is really not charging enough money to cover all of their hours. They're charging enough to cover their face-to-face time, but they are not charging enough to cover their protocol creation time. It's not a great business model because it means that you're probably not earning enough money to support yourself, and you might be thinking of quitting. The goal in my teaching is to teach you how to do an iris assessment and a protocol creation in under 75 minutes. Knowing that that protocol is designed to take your client up one notch to deal with a problem that they've got right now. And they come back after a month or 6 weeks, and you're going to then say, how are things going? What has shifted for you? And if based on what has shifted, you're going to shift the program a little bit to take them up another notch, doing it step by step in programs that are manageable for your client, that will increase their compliance and will increase their long-term retention. I have so many clients who have been with me for 25 to 40 years. Do I see them every month in that time? No, absolutely not. We see them 4 or 5 times, get them feeling really good, and then they disappear. But when things shift, usually it takes another 4 or 5 years, things will start to shift. They get older, things are, slipping. They will come back. We'll do another 3 or 4 sessions, remind them of what they know and build on that, send them away. And I've got this constant ebb and flow with my clients, which is absolutely lovely. So I asked Mike Knapp, who is a naturopath in Arizona, why did he take the course? He said he wanted the interactive online platform with an experienced teacher and practitioner. You said the fundamentals of iridology could be learned in this format, and that's what was delivered, plus a lot more on how to integrate it directly into current practice. I'm very happy with the training, so thank you. This is really important because so many iridology teachers will teach you the nuts and bolts, but they will not spend the time to teach you how to integrate it with what you do. So if you are a nutrition coach, those teachers say, you'll figure out how to use it. And I don't do that. I want to give you a platform. I want to give you an understanding of how you can integrate the iridology with what you do. Will you do it that way for the rest of your practice? Probably not, but it's a starting point. And as you start to work with it in that way, you will be able to morph it, to adjust it, to fine tune it to be something that will work for you. And so here's my invitation to you. If you're ready to learn constitutional iridology with a live teacher, with mentoring included, and you've got that college level anatomy and physiology under your belt, then I want to chat with you. I'm going to grab this, and actually I'm going to use a different link because there's one that is a little bit easier. Oops. Yep, having a little bit of a brain fart. We'll use this one because this one works too. I've been on the computer all day designing various things, different program bits and pieces, and my brain is feeling a little bit tired with it all. There we go. So that link that is in the chat box takes you to a calendar where you can schedule a time to meet with me to learn more about the course, right? And that's really important that you have that opportunity to assess whether this course is a good fit for you or not. And the next course is starting on May 15th. And I have lost my panel that lets me move things forward. That's not fun. That's not fun. Just let me do a quick stop share and then bring that back and see if we can restore it. Not quite. Okay. Well, that's probably the last slide then. Alrighty. So with that, love to answer any questions you've got. So if you've got any questions, let me know. Pop them in that chat box. Let's have a little conversation. And let's see where we're headed with this. Anyone got a question? All right, it doesn't look like it. If you're typing a question, just use the raise hand icon so that I know to wait for you. And if nothing's coming in, fantastic. So that was your introduction into the what, why, and how of iridology. No, that's another webinar coming up in a week or two. That was your introduction into the history of iridology and why there is conflicting information out there and how we should be actually using it. Thank you so much for being with me. I truly appreciate it. I'm going to get this replay out to everybody who registered, and we will talk to you soon. Hope to talk with you on a little one-on-one. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye for now.